Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Today we're going to cover a couple of topics. When and what for total hip replacements. Specifically, when do you know that you need to have a hip replaced? Secondly, what type of surgery do you want to do? So let's start with the when. Personally, I knew that there was something wrong because I was having pain in my hip, my back, and even in my groin. I was having so much pain it was impacting how I was moving. It was causing me to limp. It was causing me to favor one side. I didn't know what was wrong, but once it started to impact my daily living, I knew that I needed to do something about it. First step that I took, I contacted a friend of mine who had had a very successful hip replacement. I wanted to find out who his surgeon was. He was so pleased, and I thought, you know what, I think that's where I want to go. So I scheduled an appointment, went into the office, talked with the doctor, talked with the surgeon. He showed me the x-rays. Upon looking at those x-rays, it was pretty obvious to me that yes, I was definitely bone on that hip and I needed to have my hip replaced. To answer those questions, I've asked a couple of resident experts and fellow personal trainers, Jamie and Peter, to help me out. Both of them have had their own total hip replacement in the last few years.
Hi, I'm Jamie, a colleague of Heidi's, and in 2015 I had my left hip replaced. I had been dealing with a pain in the groin area for several years, and I kept teaching and doing everything that I wanted to do, and I just pushed through it. And I finally got to a point where it was getting hard to stand up after I was sitting for a while in a restaurant, for example. Getting in and out of the car became difficult, and so it began to affect my activities of daily living, and I decided it was time to go to my orthopedist and see what was going on. So he takes the x-ray. Sure enough, he comes in and says, "You need a total hip replacement." Surprise, surprise.
As a personal trainer and also doing the hiking program up here at the club, I'm constantly on my feet. I was getting discomfort when I was in the gym, moving around, not necessarily doing the exercise, but just normal walking around with my clients. More importantly, when I was out on the hiking trail, it started to show after the first mile or so, I was getting pain. It was getting a little bit worse. After each hike, it got a little bit worse, and it got to the point of saying, "Peter, you have to do something." So it was progressive, but every time I was moving, it was wearing a little bit more of that cartilage and creating a bone-on-bone scenario where the pain was getting impossible to live with. Okay, so having gone with physical therapy first, went to the orthopedic surgeon, and after he did the set of MRIs and x-rays, his comment was, is it to the point of you not being able to bear the pain? Can you live with it as it is? And my answer to him was, no, it's excruciating. If we could do it tomorrow morning, I'm ready to go. It was that bad. Almost brought tears to my eyes to walk at that point.
When it comes to what type of surgery you want to have, there are basically two primary methods: anterior and posterior hip replacements. Posterior actually is the more common of the two. But with anterior replacements, the incision is made in the front of the hip, which is the least invasive of the two types. By having that incision in the front, the surgeon is actually able to move muscles apart to work through them, as opposed to having to cut them in order to replace the joint.
Having spoken with the surgeon and did some research, the two options that were considered was the posterior coming through the butt, cutting through your gluteus muscles. I won't go through the technical edge, but cutting through your butt to get to the femur, which is your thigh bone, versus coming through the front with only a 3-inch incision right in the front and a little micro incision for a camera to aid the surgeon in the alignment. So I went with something much less invasive, which led to a much easier recovery.
Talking to him about, do I have the anterior or posterior, he made it very easy because he said I was the perfect candidate for the anterior incision, which is great because it is supposed to be a little easier recovery than the posterior. and you have a little more flexibility in your movements. But I have been thrilled with it. It's an easy recovery. I've been able to do everything everything just like regular.
Jamie, Peter, and I all had anterior hip replacement surgery. The advantages of the anterior replacement surgery include, number one, as I mentioned previously, it is less invasive. They're moving the muscles apart as opposed to cutting through them. It is a quicker and easier surgery. My first surgery on my left hip took a total of about 43 minutes, start to finish. That is much, much quicker and easier than I ever anticipated that surgery would be. Secondly, the recovery is quicker and easier too. From the point where I showed up at the hospital until I was heading home was a total of about 6 hours. I used a walker on the first 2 days. I would use it after that, but primarily to make sure people stayed away from me, not because I really needed it. From that point forward, after 2 days, I was using a cane. So the recovery definitely is easier. And I got back to teaching my stretch classes and my water aerobics classes fairly quickly too. Actually, those were great physical therapy sessions for me, trying to get my body back into shape. Finally, there are few limitations with an anterior replacement. There's one that I can think of, and that's you don't want to get down into a deep, deep lunge where you've got that hip coming way, way down. Oftentimes in, I believe, yoga, it's called Warrior One position. You don't want to do that because you risk the chance of dislocating your hip coming out the front. That really is the only limitation. So in summary, do not wait too long. My first time around, I was 1.5 years and I was miserable. Once you have problems with your movements that start to impact your life, get it checked out. Find out what's wrong. And secondly, if you're given a choice, consider doing an anterior hip replacement. My first experience with my left hip replacement caused me to be very quickly back into the swing of things. When my second one came up, I was like, hey, sign me up. I'll do that hip replacement. You want me in there tomorrow? I'm there. I was thrilled with my first replacement, and I'm ready for my second. And with that said, I have got to get my spool workout in, so you guys make it a great day.